In 1974, a man in rural Kentucky made more money collecting aluminum cans on weekends than his neighbor earned working overtime at the plant. No business license, no startup capital, just a pickup truck and a route he drove every Saturday morning. Before the internet turned side hustle into a buzzword, small-town Americans were already running 2 and 3 income streams out of garages, kitchens, and the backs of station wagons. Number 14 on this list was so profitable that the IRS started cracking down on it in 1979. And number 6 created an underground economy in small towns that nobody talked about, but everybody used. These 20 hustles built additions on houses, paid for braces, and put kids through college. Before we start, hit that subscribe button, because some of these might actually still work today. Let us count down the 20 forgotten side hustles that kept small-town America running. In towns where fishing was less a hobby and more a way of life, selling bait was as reliable as a government job. Kids and adults alike would head out after a heavy rain with a flashlight and a coffee can, pulling fat night crawlers from soaked lawns and garden beds. By morning, they had enough to fill styrofoam cups, a dozen per container, sold from a hand-painted sign at the end of the driveway. In the late 1960s, a cup of 12 night crawlers sold for about 50 cents. By 1980, the price had climbed to $1.50. Serious operators built worm beds in their basements or garages, feeding the crawlers coffee grounds and shredded newspaper, harvesting hundreds per week without ever leaving the property. Gas station owners bought in bulk. Bait shops placed standing orders. One man outside of Branson, Missouri, reportedly cleared $200 a week during bass season, all from worms he raised in a plywood box behind his house. The smell was something you never forgot, damp earth and decomposition. But neither was the money. When Walmart started selling packaged bait in the mid-1980s, the driveway signs started coming down. But for 2 decades, night crawlers were small-town gold pulled straight from the dirt. Number 19, sharpening knives and tools door to door. The knife sharpener drove a route through town the way the milkman once did. He carried a grinding wheel mounted in the bed of his truck or bolted to a workbench in a van, and he announced himself by honking twice at the end of each block. Housewives brought out kitchen knives wrapped in dish towels. Farmers hauled over axe heads and mower blades. Barbers handed over their scissors. In the early 1970s, a standard kitchen knife sharpening cost about 25 cents. A set of 6 cost $1. The sharpener could do 40 to 60 knives in an afternoon, clearing $15 to $20 for a few hours of sparks and grinding. The sound of steel against stone carried through open windows, and children gathered to watch the orange sparks fly off the wheel. Some sharpeners added lawnmower blade service in the spring, charging $1 per blade, and they made their best money in March and April, when every man in town was pulling his mower out of the shed. The trade died slowly as disposable kitchen knives flooded the market, and electric sharpeners appeared in hardware store catalogs. But in the 1960s and the 1970s, the sharpening truck was as welcome as the ice cream van. Number 18, roadside produce stands. Every small town had them. Folding tables set up at the edge of a front yard, loaded with tomatoes, sweet corn, green beans, and whatever else the garden was producing faster than the family could eat. A bushel of tomatoes sold for about $2 in 1968. Sweet corn went for 25 cents a dozen. The stands operated on the honor system more often than not. A cigar box with a slit in the lid and a sign that said, "Pay here." Nobody watched and nobody stole. Families with a quarter acre of good soil could clear $50 to $100 a week at the peak of summer. Serious money when a mortgage payment ran about $90 a month. The most successful operators planted specifically for selling, putting in extra rows of zucchini, peppers, and watermelon. By August, the stand practically ran itself. Neighbors became regulars. Church ladies stopped by on Wednesday afternoons. The smell of ripe tomatoes warming in the sun was the smell of summer income. Supermarket produce sections grew larger and cheaper through the 1980s, and the roadside stands slowly disappeared. But for a generation, that card table at the end of the driveway was a small business that required no overhead, no employees, and no permission. A man with a pickup truck and a strong back could make a living hauling scrap in the 1960s and 1970s. Old washing machines, busted water heaters, rolls of copper wire pulled from demolished buildings, all of it had value at the scrapyard. In 1972, scrap steel brought about $40 a ton. Copper ran around 50 cents a pound. Aluminum was the real prize, nearly 30 cents a pound. Haulers drove through alleys and back roads, knocked on doors, and offered to take away anything metal for free. The homeowner got a clean yard. The hauler got paid twice, once for the removal job and again at the scrapyard. Some men ran regular routes, hitting the same neighborhoods every few weeks, building relationships with families who saved their cans and broken appliances. On a good Saturday, a scrapper could clear $50 to $75, the equivalent of nearly $300 today. The truck bed would be heaped with jagged metal, the cab smelling of rust and motor oil. It was hard, dirty work, but it asked nothing of you except showing up. Environmental regulations and liability concerns thinned the ranks in the 1980s, but scrap hauling built more garages and paid more property taxes than most people ever knew. Number 16. Selling Avon, Tupperware, and Fuller brush. Before multi-level marketing became a punchline, direct sales was the most common side hustle for women in small-town America. An Avon lady could cover her entire town on foot, ringing doorbells with a sample case and a catalog. In 1965, Avon had over 400,000 representatives in the United States. A good seller in a town of 2,000 could earn $50 to $100 a month in commissions, enough to cover groceries or a car payment. Tupperware parties turned living rooms into showrooms. The hostess served coffee cake and ambrosia salad while the rep demonstrated the famous burping seal on a bowl of leftovers. Fuller brush men carried sample kits door to door, demonstrating mops and brooms on front porches. The secret was that in small towns, these were not strangers selling products. They were neighbors. You bought from Betty because Betty's daughter was in your son's class. You ordered Avon from Darlene because Darlene brought you a casserole when your mother passed. Trust was the business model. It worked because everybody knew everybody, and your reputation was your credit score. The rise of shopping malls and catalog retail in the late 1970s began pulling customers away. But for 2 decades, a woman with a sample case and a good reputation could build a real income without ever leaving her zip code. First pattern break. Here is where things get interesting. The next group of hustles were not just about earning extra cash. They were about filling gaps that no business in town bothered to fill. And some of them were so clever that modern entrepreneurs would call them genius if they saw them today. Number 15. Collecting and selling aluminum cans. Recycling was not a government program in the 1960s. It was a side hustle. When Reynolds Metals Company began buying back aluminum cans in 1968, paying 1 cent per can, it created an instant economy in every small town in America. Kids dragged garbage bags along roadsides after the 4th of July parades. Retired men drove pickup trucks along county highways at dawn, pulling over every 50 yards to grab crushed Budweiser cans from the ditch. By 1975, the price had climbed to nearly 2 cents per can, and a dedicated collector could gather 500 to 1,000 cans in a weekend. At that rate, a family of 4 working Saturday mornings could clear $10 to $20 a week, enough to cover a week of groceries. Churches organized can drives. Scout troops competed for collection totals. The sound of cans being stomped flat in the garage was as common as lawnmowers on summer evenings. Some families built wire mesh bins in their yards, and neighbors tossed cans in as they walked by. The aluminum can hustle taught an entire generation that what other people threw away had value. And for millions of Americans, it was the first side hustle they ever ran. Number 14. Small engine repair. The man who could fix a lawnmower, a chainsaw, or a garden tiller in his garage was never short of customers. In the 1970s, every household owned at least 2 or 3 small engines, and none of them ran right for more than a season. A carburetor cleaning cost $5. A full tune-up ran about $10. Replacing a pull cord was $3.15. He did not advertise. He did not need to. Word of mouth filled his weekends from April through October. He worked out of a detached garage or a lean-to shed. Tools hung on pegboard walls. A coffee can full of spare spark plugs on the workbench. The smell of gasoline and 2-stroke oil hung in the air permanently. By the late 1970s, the IRS began paying attention to the cash economy that small engine mechanics represented. Some of these men were clearing $5,000 to $8,000 a year in unreported income, enough to trigger audits in small towns where bank deposits did not match tax returns. The crackdown pushed some operators to start filing. Others simply started accepting payment in favors, firewood, venison, and help with roofing. The hustle never fully died. In every small town in America, there is still a guy who fixes mowers in his garage. He just charges $60 now instead of $5. Number 13. Babysitting networks. Before daycare centers dotted every suburb, babysitting was the unofficial economy of every neighborhood. Teenage girls earned 50 cents an hour in the mid-1960s, climbing to $1 by 1975. But the real money was made by the women who ran informal babysitting co-ops out of their homes, watching 4 or 5 children at a time, for $1 per child per day. In a town where the nearest licensed daycare was 30 miles away, these women filled a critical gap. Mothers dropped kids off at 7 in the morning and picked them up at 5 in the afternoon. The children ate peanut butter sandwiches, watched Captain Kangaroo, and played in the backyard until their shoes wore through. Some women ran these operations for years, earning $200 to $300 a month in cash. No sign on the door, no license on the wall, just a reputation built on the fact that Shirley down the street had been watching kids since 1962, and none of them had ever come home with more than a skinned knee. State licensing requirements expanded through the 1980s, and the informal network slowly gave way to regulated facilities. But for decades, the neighborhood babysitter was the infrastructure that allowed small-town mothers to work. Number 12. Selling firewood. In towns where wood stoves heated half the houses, selling firewood was a 4-season business, disguised as a winter one. The smart operators spent spring and summer felling dead trees, splitting logs, and stacking cords to season in the sun. By October, they had inventory. A cord of seasoned oak sold for about $35 in 1970. By 1982, the price had jumped to $75 as the energy crisis drove families back to wood heat. A man with a chainsaw, a splitting maul, and a strong teenager could produce 2 or 3 cords a week. The work was brutal. Splinters embedded in every callus. Sawdust lined the inside of your nose for days. But the math was simple. 3 cords a week at $40 each was $120, nearly what some men earned at their day jobs. Delivery was part of the service. You backed the truck up to the customer's woodpile and stacked it yourself. Tips came in the form of cold beer and conversation. The firewood hustle peaked during the oil embargo of 1973, when heating oil prices doubled overnight and suddenly every man with a woodlot was in business. Some never stopped. The woman who took in ironing was a fixture of small-town life from the Depression through the early 1980s. She charged 10 to 15 cents per shirt in the 1960s. working through a basket of wrinkled clothes while watching her stories on television. A steady customer base of 5 or 6 families brought in $10 to $15 a week. Combined with mending, hemming pants, replacing zippers, and letting out seams, the income could reach $25 a week. That was gas money, school supplies, and Christmas presents. The ironing board stayed up permanently in the back room, a cotton pressing cloth draped over the end, a spray bottle of starch within arm's reach. The smell of hot cotton and steam filled the house every afternoon. Some women built clientele lists of 20 or more families, picking up bundles on Monday and delivering pressed shirts by Wednesday. Permanent press fabrics arrived in the mid-1970s and gutted the ironing business almost overnight. Suddenly, nobody needed their shirts pressed. The ironing boards came down. The spray bottles went under the sink. A quiet, dignified hustle that had supported women for generations vanished in less than a decade. Second pattern break. Now here is where the list gets personal. The next group of hustles were not just jobs, they were identities. The man who did these things was known for them. His neighbors defined him by the service he provided, and his reputation was the only marketing he ever needed. Number 10. Running a small-town taxi service. In towns too small for a cab company but too spread out to walk, somebody always had an unofficial taxi. Usually it was a retired man with a 4-door sedan and nowhere particular to be. He would drive elderly neighbors to doctor's appointments, take teenagers to the movies in the next town over, and haul groceries for widows who had stopped driving. The fee was whatever felt right. $1 for a trip across town, $3 to the county seat, $5 to the hospital 40 miles away. In the 1970s, a driver running 3 or 4 trips a day could clear $15 to $20, enough to cover his own gas and put a little aside. The car smelled of Armor All and cigarettes. The radio stayed on the AM country station. Conversation was included at no extra charge. He knew every road, every shortcut, and every pothole in the county. Ride-sharing apps did not kill this hustle. It was already gone by the 1990s, replaced by senior transit programs and volunteer driver networks. But for 30 years, the man with the sedan was the most important service provider in towns that the rest of the world forgot. A flock of 20 hens produced about a dozen eggs a day. In the 1960s, a dozen farm-fresh eggs sold for 30 to 40 cents at the back door. The investment was minimal. A bag of laying mash cost about $3 and lasted 2 weeks. The coop was built from scrap lumber and chicken wire. The hens did the rest. Families sold to neighbors, co-workers, and the ladies at church. No middleman, no packaging, just a cardboard carton refilled and returned each week. A good flock could bring in $8 to $12 a month, covering its own feed and leaving profit besides. The eggs were different from store-bought. The yolks stood up tall and bright orange, almost shocking next to the pale yellow of supermarket eggs. Customers noticed and came back every week. Some sellers built waiting lists. Health department regulations tightened through the 1970s, and grocery store prices dropped low enough to make backyard eggs seem like more trouble than they were worth. The flock shrank. The coops rotted. But a generation of Americans grew up knowing exactly where their breakfast came from, because it came from the yard. The upholsterer worked out of a shop behind his house, or in a corner of the garage, surrounded by bolts of fabric, jars of tacks, and the sharp smell of contact cement. He could take a couch that looked ready for the dump and make it look like it came from Sears that morning. In the 1960s, reupholstering a sofa cost between $35 and $60, compared to $200 or more for a new one. The math made the decision easy for most families. He stripped the old fabric, replaced worn padding, and stretched new material tight over the frame, tacking it down with a magnetic tack hammer that never seemed to miss. Customers chose from sample books the size of phone directories. Floral prints were popular. So was anything in harvest gold or avocado green. A skilled upholsterer could finish a chair in a day and a sofa in 3. With a backlog of 2 or 3 weeks, the income was steady year-round. Disposable furniture from overseas killed the trade in the 1990s. When a new couch cost less than reupholstering the old one, the phone stopped ringing. But in the decades before that, the upholsterer saved families thousands of dollars and kept living rooms looking respectable on a working man's budget. Number 7. Photography at local events. Before everyone carried a camera in their pocket, the local photographer was essential to every wedding, graduation, family reunion, and church picnic. He shot with a Mamiya or a Hasselblad, developed prints in a dark room he built in the basement, and delivered finished photos in a cardboard folder with his name stamped on the front. In the early 1970s, a wedding package ran about $75 to $150. Senior portraits were $15 for a sitting and 5 prints. The photographer knew every family in town, which meant he knew which grandmother needed to be in the front row and which uncle should not be seated next to which cousin. Saturday was the busiest day. A photographer could shoot a morning wedding, an afternoon birthday party, and still make it to the high school football game for the yearbook. The dark room smelled of fixer and developer, and his fingers were permanently stained. 1-hour photo labs arrived in the 1980s, and digital cameras finished the job in the 2000s. But for a generation, the man with the camera and the basement darkroom was the keeper of a town's memories. Number 6. Hauling and odd jobs for cash. This was the side hustle that had no name, but every small town had at least 3 or 4 men who did it. Need a stump pulled? Call Ray. Need furniture moved to your daughter's apartment 2 towns over? Call Ray. Need the garage cleaned out before the estate sale? Call Ray. The rate was $10 a job in the 1970s, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on how heavy the work was and how well Ray knew you. These men operated entirely in cash. No invoices, no receipts, no tax returns that reflected the true scope of their income. They owned trucks with dented tailgates and toolboxes bolted to the bed. They carried tow chains, come-alongs, and a chainsaw that started on the 3rd pull if you held it just right. The underground economy they created in small towns was enormous. Neighbors traded labor for labor, cash for favors, and venison for help with the plumbing. Nobody talked about it because everybody benefited from it. The gig economy thinks it invented flexible work. Small-town America was running it 40 years earlier with a handshake and a truck. 3rd pattern break. The final group of hustles were the ones that felt almost too simple to be real businesses. But they worked. And the people who ran them understood something that modern entrepreneurs spend thousands on business school trying to learn. Fill a need that nobody else is filling, and the customers will find you. Number 5. Piano and music lessons. The piano teacher lived on every 3rd block in small-town America. She had a spinet, or an upright in the front room, a metronome on top, and a candy dish that rewarded students who practiced their scales. In the 1960s, a half-hour lesson cost $1 to $1.50. By 1980, the rate had climbed to $5. With 15 to 20 students a week, a piano teacher earned $75 to $100 a month. Respectable supplemental income for a time when many married women were not working outside the home. Guitar lessons, trumpet lessons, and drum lessons followed the same model. The teacher was usually someone who had played in the high school band 20 years earlier and never stopped. Recitals were held in the living room. Parents sat on folding chairs and clapped for every stumbling rendition of Fur Elise. The lessons were about more than music. They were structure, discipline, and the first time many children learned that practice produced results. When school music programs were cut in the 1980s, some private teachers picked up the slack. Others simply aged out. But for decades, the sound of a child murdering chopsticks on a Tuesday afternoon was the sound of a small-town economy at work. In rural America from the 1960s through the early 1980s, trapping was a legitimate and profitable side hustle. A man could run a trap line along creek beds and fence rows before dawn, check it again at dusk, and sell the pelts to a fur buyer, or buyer who drove through town every few weeks. In 1978, a prime muskrat pelt brought $3 to $5. Raccoon pelts ran $8 to $12. Mink, if you were lucky enough to catch one, could bring $25 or more. A trapper running 50 to 80 traps could earn $200 to $400 a month during the winter season. The work started in November and ran through February. It meant wading through frozen creeks, skinning animals on a board in the garage, and stretching pelts on wire frames to dry. The smell of a drying shed was something that stayed with you. Children helped with the skinning, learning the trade the way their fathers and grandfathers had. The anti-fur movement gained momentum in the 1980s, and pelt prices collapsed. By 1990, a muskrat pelt that once brought $5 was worth 50 cents. The trap lines went quiet. The fur buyers stopped coming, and a hustle that had supplemented rural incomes for generations disappeared almost overnight. The woman who baked cakes for the town did not call herself a caterer. She was just the person you called when you needed a 3-tier wedding cake, a sheet cake for the church potluck, or 4 dozen cookies for the school bake sale. In the 1970s, a decorated birthday cake sold for $5 to $8. A wedding cake ran $25 to $50. She baked in her home kitchen, using recipes copied onto index cards in her mother's handwriting, and decorated with a pastry bag, a turntable, and a steady hand. Her kitchen smelled permanently of vanilla extract and buttercream. Flour dusted the telephone receiver. Orders came in by word of mouth, and her calendar filled weeks in advance for graduation season, June weddings, and the holidays. Some women earned $200 to $300 a month from baking alone. All of it cash, all of it invisible to anyone who was not eating the cake. Cottage food laws were non-existent or unenforced in most states until the 1990s. The home baker operated in a gray zone that nobody questioned because the cakes were too good to question. Commercial bakeries and grocery store cake departments eventually undercut her on price, but they never matched the cake that tasted like someone actually cared who was eating it. Number 2. CB radio repair and installation. The CB radio craze of the mid-1970s exploded almost overnight. When Smokey and the Bandit hit theaters in 1977, and every truck driver, teenager, and bored commuter wanted a Citizens Band radio in their vehicle, the person who could install and repair them became the most popular person in town. A basic installation ran $15 to $25. Antenna mounting was another $10. Repairs on a busted squelch knob or a blown channel selector brought in steady, repeat business. In 1977, Americans bought over 11 million CB radios. Every one of them needed to be installed, tuned, and eventually fixed. The electronics hobbyist who had been tinkering with ham radios in his basement suddenly had a 6-week backlog and more cash than he knew what to do with. His workbench was covered in soldering irons, coaxial cable, and SWR meters. But for about 5 years, CB installation and repair was the most profitable garage-based side hustle in America. Some of those technicians transitioned into satellite dish installation in the mid-1980s, riding the next wave of technology that small-town America could not get enough of. Number 1. Custom taxidermy. The taxidermist in every small town ran his operation out of a basement or a detached workshop that smelled of borax, tanning solution, and something faintly wild you could never quite identify. In a region where hunting was not recreation but tradition, the taxidermist was essential. He turned a 10-point buck into a wall mount that hung above the fireplace for 40 years. In the 1970s, a standard deer head mount cost $35 to $50. A full fish mount ran $20 to $30. A good taxidermist with a reputation for lifelike eyes and natural poses had a waiting list that stretched from November through spring. He worked nights and weekends after his day job, spending hours sculpting forms, stretching hides, and painting details onto glass eyes. The workshop walls were lined with finished mounts, waiting for pickup and half-finished projects in various stages of preservation. Children in the neighborhood dared each other to peek through the windows. During deer season, his phone rang constantly. Hunters dropped off capes wrapped in garbage bags, still warm, hoping for a spot on the list. A skilled taxidermist could earn $3,000 to $5,000 during hunting season alone. Money that paid for a boat, a new roof, or a year of a child's college tuition. The trade has not disappeared entirely, but the golden era, when every small town had its own taxidermist and every den wall told a story, has faded into the kind of memory that smells like sawdust and feels like November. These 20 side hustles were not business plans. They were survival strategies, dressed in work boots and common sense. From the teenager pulling night crawlers out of wet grass to the woman frosting a wedding cake at midnight, small-town America ran on an invisible economy that no spreadsheet ever captured. The money was cash, the contracts were handshakes, and the advertising was nothing more than a neighbor telling another neighbor that Ray could pull a stump for $10. What killed most of these hustles was not laziness or lack of ambition. It was the same force that reshapes everything. The world got bigger, cheaper, and faster, and the things that once required a local person with local knowledge could suddenly be bought in a box from a store with fluorescent lights and automatic doors. But here is what we lost along with them. We lost the knowledge that a person could build something real with nothing but skill, sweat, and a reputation. Try one. Pick up a side hustle your grandfather would recognize. You might be surprised how well the old ways still work.